Hi, Shep.
What's up? They just told Mr. Mute, so I'm muting now.
Yeah, we're ready to go. Good evening, everybody. Uh, my name is Ann Lamb, and I work with the New York City chapter of the National Jericho Movement. We were founded in 1996, so we've been around for a good long time, by Brother Herman Ferguson, who is now an ancestor, Sister Safiya Bukhari, who is now an ancestor, and Jalil Muntakim, who is no longer a political prisoner. So at that time, Herman and Safiya were both former political prisoners, and Jalil was still incarcerated. So we're going to watch Safiya's speech at the Jericho 1998 March, where she lays out in quite good detail all the work that we ought to do. And we have answered her call to action and have been actively supporting our political prisoners ever since then. So with no further ado, Sister Safiya Bukhari, Jericho 98.
Of the New African Liberation Front, what Jericho 98 is. It's not just a demonstration at the White House. It's the beginning of a new commitment to our political prisoners and prisoners of war. Then, in a statement from brother and political prisoner Jalil Muntakim, you're encouraged to go on from Jericho to create a new Jerusalem. And if you haven't heard the statement, get a copy of the Jericho Movement newspaper, and the statement's in there. A metaphor to go on from Jericho to build a new Jerusalem. A metaphor I take to mean leave Jericho today with a commitment to do the work to make this idea of tearing down the walls and freeing our political prisoners a reality. 18 months ago, the Provisional Government Republic of New Africa and the New African Liberation Front began this process that has brought us here today. During the course of the last 18 months, we reached out to groups and formations all across the country and
Are you listening to this?
to support us in this campaign.
Huh?
To come together to build a movement to demand recognition
How do
and
you turn it up?
amnesty for our political prisoners. We reached out to the National Committee to free Puerto Rican prisoners of war, the International Concerned Families and Friends of Mumia Abu-Jamal, the National Conference of Black Lawyers, Refuse and Resist, the Not on the Guest List Coalition, Asians for Mumia, the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee, Interfaith Prisoners of Conscience Project, MOVE, the Anarchist Black Cross Network, and other organizations from all across the country and other ethnic persuasions. We reached out to all the defense committees for political prisoners and to put out a call to all the revolutionaries and activist organizations. We did this because we knew that this time we had to put aside our differences and come together, as Malcolm said, on the basis of what we had in common. What we have in common is a common enemy in a common struggle. The common enemy being the racist, sexist, colonialist, imperialist, capitalist system of the United States of America. A system that promotes and supports police brutality and murder of people of color and of other oppressed people. A system that promotes property value over human lives and dignity. A system that promotes the dollar profit over the rights of the people to decent housing, education, and employment. A system that utilizes racism as a tool to keep us divided and fighting amongst ourselves, and as a means of justifying the continued inhuman acts perpetrated against people of African descent in this country. A system that invades third world underprivileged countries and colonizes them, utilizing their young for cannon fodder in their wars of aggression, and their land as dumping grounds for their waste. Our common struggle is against the enemy that perpetuates these evils. Our common struggle is against the enemy that utilizes a propaganda war to criminalize our struggles, to demonize us, to make the world believe that our struggles are not just struggles, and the captured combatants, the freedom fighters, the captured comrades are not political prisoners, but criminals. Jericho date is designed to take away the United States' ability to define our struggle for us, but by denying our political prisoners exist inside the prisons and jails of the United States. With the show of force in numbers here today, we're saying to the government of the United States, we will no longer be silent while you hold our political prisoners within your prisons. Some of them have been in your prisons for over 30 years, while we have allowed you to take away your denial of their existence, to get away with your denial of their existence, and your criminalization of our struggle, and the murder of political prisoners like Ahmed Evans, Bobby Garcia, George Jackson, and Merle Austin Africa. We're serving notice that the silence ends today. 30 years is 29 years and 364 days too long. But by our presence here today, we're saying to the government of the United States, we are well aware that you've gotten away with it this long, because we didn't hold up our end of the struggle. But we are making a new commitment to our political prisoners and to the struggle. We are making a new commitment to support our political prisoners and prisoners of war. The form that the support for our political prisoners and prisoners of war will take has to be on many different levels. I don't want to just talk on a philosophical level or throw angry words at the White House, but I want to get down and dirty and factual right here. This Jericho March is not just a feel-good session. When we leave this place today, we have to go back to our various cities and states and begin to do the real hard day-to-day work of making Jericho a reality. We talked about educating our communities and the world to the existence of political prisoners and prisoners of war in the United States. Over the last 18 months, we've been doing that, and we've done a monumental job so far, but the work has to continue. We cannot let the education campaign that we've begun stop. We have to step up the pace. We still have a job to do in this area. We talked about putting a face on the political prisoners, who in many cases do not and have not been receiving visits, who are spending years in isolation, does not have commissary, etc., and have been cut off from their families and friends. We have to make contact and make sure that they receive these basic needs that let them know that they are not alone and forgotten. These are our freedom fighters, and it's up to us to take care of them. We talk about recognition as political prisoners and prisoners of war. The United States of America continues to deny the existence of these political prisoners and prisoners of war. We have to continue this struggle for recognition into the international arena, as Geronimo has said. We have to continue to raise the issue. We have to put together an organized force whose work for the next year will be to work in the various international arenas, pushing the fact that political prisoners exist in this country. We have to make it so that every time the United States government raises the issue of human rights violations and the treatment of dissenters anywhere in the world and calls for the release of political prisoners, they are met by the question, what about the political prisoners in your jail, America? We talked about amnesty for our political prisoners. Well, amnesty is not going to be won in one day with one march. We have to work to make this amnesty campaign real. We have to be in it for the long haul. When we go back to wherever we came from, we have to continue to work for recognition and amnesty for our political prisoners. Over and over again, the political prisoners have said that for the first time in forever, they can see a glimmer of light at the end of a tunnel, because we have begun to understand that support for our political prisoners are an integral part of the struggle. That a movement that doesn't support its captured combatants, its freedom fighters, its political prisoners, and prisoners of war is a sham movement. Finally, we talked about the conditions of confinement of our political prisoners and prisoners of war. Without lawyers to intervene in how the state subjects them to cruel and inhuman punishment, i.e., for example, the recent designation of no human contact assigned to Sekou Odinga, or the inadequate medical care that political prisoners across the board like Oscar Lopez Rivera, Marilyn Buck, Mutulu Shakur, Bashir Ahmed, and many, many others are facing daily. Without lawyers to to challenge their convictions, their lengthy sentences, and the conditions of their confinement, our political prisoners are left at the mercy of our enemy. We have to put together the resources, both human and financial, to deal with supplying lawyers to our political prisoners. Right. So what exactly are we saying? Jericho, over the next year and longer, will address the issues of, one, recognition for our political prisoners and prisoners of war. We want you to go back to your communities and either join with the work of your local Jericho organizing committee, and if one does not exist, create one to educate people in your area about political prisoners. Two, visit, send commissary to, and otherwise support political prisoners. We want you to either adopt a political prisoner or support other efforts to give material aid to our political prisoners in the form of visits, either assisting the families to visits or making sure that their basic needs are met. Three, amnesty for political prisoners. We need to continue to press the amnesty question in all the different arenas. Jericho has to continue to push this issue. Over the next year, the Jericho organizing committees and the organizations who have endorsed the work of Jericho must be prepared to follow through. The attorneys that have been assigned to do this work in conjunction with the organizing committees have to perfect the strategy and move it forward. Right. Four, the National Legal Defense Fund. No matter how we approach it, without the financial component, without this financial component, we will not do justice to the issue of support for our political prisoners. Over the last 30 years, we have gone through an enormous amount of money, and we have not moved any closer to the freedom for the vast majority of our political prisoners. We need to form a National Legal Defense Fund for our political prisoners and prisoners of war. To do this, we need to keep up the fundraising to build this fund. We need to build this fund so that we can get lawyers on the case and on the scene as soon as they're needed. Oftentimes, the delay in making legal assistance available means the difference in life and death for our political prisoners. We also need to organize and politicize students coming out of law schools to take up this issue. Building a cadre of lawyers we can trust and depend on to advocate on behalf of our political prisoners. Our new commitment to our political prisoners has to be rooted in concrete work on their behalf. These political prisoners didn't come out of a vacuum, but are out of our struggles for freedom, independence, and self-determination. These struggles have not been won and continue. Therefore, the probability of new political prisoners remain. Our reaffirming our commitment to our political prisoners through building this Jericho movement institutionalizes our political prisoners, the support for our political prisoners. If we are to be victorious in our struggles, we have to begin to approach our struggle in a more professional manner and not the hit and miss way we have done in the past. We have served notice on the seat of government of the United States today that we will no longer allow the silence around the issue of political prisoners to continue. Now we have to go back and show by our actions that we are prepared to do just what it takes to make the dismantling of the walls of Jericho a reality. Joshua had determination and dedication it took to keep attacking the walls of Jericho until they fell. It took Joshua marching around those walls 7 times. We must be of no less determination and dedication to winning recognition and amnesty for our political prisoners. Remember Merle, Austin, Africa, free all political prisoners and prisoners of war, and build Jericho.
Yeah, right on.
Nothing like Sister Safiya giving us so much notice. As I say, we've been following them ever since, and we've had some victories, more than the ones we're just celebrating today, which are only for people who were released in the past year. We've gotten out more than that, thank goodness. We also have many more ancestors than who we're speaking of today. Well, next up we have our sister Nzinga, who is a great poet. She often performs on Ralph and Betty's show. Ralph and Betty now have 2 shows. They have one on Tuesday nights, What's Happening? Human Rights Demand with Ralph Pointer on Tuesday nights from 9 to 10, off until 10:30. And they now have a program on WBAI as well on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. They're both members of the New York City chapter of Jericho, in addition to all the other work that they do. Amazing warriors, both of them. And Sister Nzinga has often read her beautiful poetry on their program. She is also active in the movement to gain official recognition of the Brooklyn African Burial Ground. And I am very proud to present our sister, Nzinga. You're muted. You're muted.
No, I always forget to unmute. So good evening and thank you. It's a pleasure to see everyone. So I thought it would only be fitting to do a poem on Dr. Martin Luther King, since his birthday was this past week. But the poem is based on a speech that he made, called The New Politic. And that's the title of my poem. It's more like the radical side of Dr. Martin Luther King. So, The New Politics. I have a dream. Those words so powerfully spoken by Dr. Martin Luther King. He had a dream that the corrosive evil of racism would be forbidden all across this nation. That one day, hatred and inequality would be no cause for social justice, injustice, and poverty. He cautioned that we lived in a nation who is a staunch advocate of socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor, who instead of using funds to end hunger would rather use them to finance war. He had a dream that all men would be treated equal, but he also proposed that a Congress who continue to oppress people living under economic stress should immediately be dismissed. His words, that capitalism was built on the exploitation and suffering of the enslaved in this nation and abroad, and continues to prosper on the manipulation of the poor, still resonate today. He spoke out about the triple threat of racism, materialism, and militarism, and how we've been misled, deluded, and betrayed. How our hopes had unfortunately been blasted, and our dreams of freedom and justice shattered. He strongly advocated that we control our own destiny with a new politics, void of racial and economic injustice. For our problems as they exist would never be solved without it. That in order to get our reparations, we need a serious, radical reorganization of the political and economic power, a new politics that will keep us empowered. He spoke of a true revelation of values where one would look uneasily on the glittering disparities of wealth and economic parity. A true revelation of values that will say of war no more, that perceives the business of a nation who injects poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of people normally humane and sends men home from bloody battlefields, physically handicapped and psychologically deranged. A nation who year after year spends more money on military defense rather than helping poor communities socially uplift. I still hear the echoes of Dr. King and the people's cry for liberty. I hear him calling for an end to racial injustice, to acts of evil imposed by this government. I can hear him say, if America does not respond creatively to the challenges of racism and inequality, that the nation will cease to exist because it lacks the soul and the commitment to end the evil injustices perpetuated by its government. Thank you all. Thank you. Can you hear me? Can't hear you.
Yeah, that was fantastic. What a great poem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All righty. Okay. Our brother Russell Maroon Shoatz was captured in January 1972 and spent more than 49 years in prison, 29 of them in solitary confinement. His family, along with the Free Maroon Coalition and the Abolitionist Law Center, worked hard for his medical transfer to hospice care, and Maroon was released on October 26, 2021. Suffering from stage 4 cancer, Maroon was able to spend his final days surrounded by his family and loved ones. He transitioned on December 17, 2021. Our dear brother Ghani is here to speak about his friend and mentor, and his daughter Teresa Shoatz is here as well.
Peace, light, and power, everybody. Thank you. On the move, on the move, on the move. Free the land. It's a blessing and an honor to be here. I know we're working with some severe time constraints, and so we'll try to run through this so I could leave room for, our sister, warrior, Teresa Shoatz, to say something about her dad. We know what Maroon's politics is. We know what his analysis is. He's left us a treasure and a legacy of political clarity and revolutionary theory. So that's not what I'm going to get into right here. What's grounding my thinking about how to approach a conversation about Maroon, which is really difficult to do, because you want to do somebody like him and his legacy justice, is a book that Maroon was very concerned about when we would huddle up in the auditorium at Greater Ford after he was released from the RHU, just before I was released. It was a book that had came out at that time. I think it was 2015. Some of y'all might have heard about it, called Days of Rage, America's Radical Underground, the FBI and the Forgotten Age of Revolutionary Violence. It was written by a dude named Brian Burrow. And this guy, he expended a lot of analysis and painting people in the movement, from the Symbionese Liberation Army to Weather Underground to Black Liberation Army, as basically psychopaths. And Maroon was concerned about this because he thought that we would have to push back against this, you know what I'm saying, intellectually, right? And so, and by humanizing, not necessarily, this dude sought to create our political freedom fighters into monsters, and our mystification of our political combatants is sometimes just as harmful as the state's monstification of them. And so my approach to this is just about, from a perspective of Maroon, that people on the streets didn't see, as a brother that was doing time with him. Now, it's been about 4 years since my release, after serving 30 years of a sentence to life without parole that began when I was 15 years old in 1987. Some attention has been given to my growth and development behind prison walls and the advocacy work and the service that I continued since I've been home. But not much is known, and a lot more needs to be known about the role that Maroon, right, played in my development, the development of the human being and community member that I am today. You know, I first met Maroon in 1995 at SCI Green, in a control unit in the hole. And I was sent there from SCI Huntington. SCI Green was the first prison that was explicitly built for the most implacable and so-called, you know, uncontrollable, you know, incarcerated people in the state. Maroon was one of the first people in that prison, right? I came there maybe a few months after him. So I was 23 years old at the time. So I had already probably about maybe 7 or 8 years in, I think. And although I'd already set out on the path to personal betterment, and I was still wet behind the ears, you know, about social and ecological responsibility. And in my political analysis, I was still in transition from the rashness of youth to the poised and patient maturity of adulthood, right? And I was still full of contradictions tied to my own anger, frustration, inadequacies, and shame and all of that. Yet Maroon saw potential in me, as he saw in many young people who unfortunately found themselves in the solitary confinement units of prison where he had spent much of his life. And it was in those spaces of hopelessness, right, that Maroon and I began to talk with each other and had become very close friends. Matter of fact, even before I got there, Maroon's legend had already preceded him. I've been hearing about him for years and about his spectacular exploits, his escapes from prison and so on and so forth, right? And to me, I was like, wow, somebody like that actually exists. And it was Joseph Jojo Bourne, another political prisoner who I was in the hole with before I got transferred from Huntington, that told me to seek out Maroon, right? When you see him, let him know that I sent you. And I met Maroon in the yard, what they call yards, really dog kennels, in that was called yards in the hole. And I zeroed in on him because he was talking to, I mean, he commanded the attention of everybody else that was out in the cages out there with him, working out. And he was talking about what else? The Maroons. And I had just started reading about the Maroons. And I really wanted to touch bases with him about the history of the Maroons to see what he knew about them. And he was schooling people about the Maroons at the time. But over the span of 23 years, right, which is when the time I spent with Maroon behind the walls, he became, unbeknownst to him, an advisor, a consigliere, a role model, and even a surrogate pop, you know, a surrogate father, everything that characterizes, you know, a mentor, you know what I mean, to me. Our intense political discussions on morality and what it means to be human, right? And to treat others with dignity. That was first. You know, he showered me with materials, like cultural materials and historical materials first, right? Like Sheikh Anta Diop's African Origin of Civilization, Chancellor Williams' Destruction of a Black Civilizations, all Ivan Van Sertima Journal of African Civilizations books, John G. Jackson's Introduction to Black Civilization. Dan got me into C.L.R. James' History of Pan-African Resistance and the Black Jacobins and things like that. He walked me through, he took me through a timeline of political development. I was hungry for the more military stuff because that's what I had heard about him, and the technical stuff. I wanted to learn the war stuff because I was still in that false machismo kind of thing, right? And I had heard that this is what he was. He was the general. But he told me he knew that's what I wanted, but he wasn't going to give me that because he wasn't going to make the same mistake that him and JoJo had made with a lot of other young brothers in the past by giving them the hardcore male machismo, toxic masculinity, testosterone laden concept of liberation. You dig what I'm struggle. He wanted me to be grounded in culture and self-love first, to understand what it is and who it was that I'm fighting for, right? Because he felt as though he had made a mistake in the past of teaching the military stuff and the war stuff and the resistance stuff, the hardcore stuff to young people in the past. And they had actually got out on the streets and became better, more intellectual killers of their own people. You understand what I'm saying? And so Maroon didn't want to do that. So he grounded me. He took me, he grounded me in my roots. He rooted me first before he taught me anything militarily. He didn't want me and others to be driven and guided by the same problematic attitudes and perceptions that had guided his young life, you know, attitudes and perceptions shaped by rage, humiliation, shame, testosterone, and erroneous ideas of what being a man is about. Most of all, he stressed to young people such as myself that we shun all reliance on violence as a resort to addressing grievances and alleviating frustrations, right? He advised us to instead rely on dialogue, debate, civic engagement, civil organizing, and diplomacy. He emphasized that violence continues a cycle of misery from one generation to the next, you know, and I would argue to my last breath that I'm the kind of human being today because of Russell Maroon Shoatz. Even in my new role as program manager of a restorative justice diversion program, diverting young people from being charged using restorative justice process, right? Maroon, his influence can be seen in that work, right? He and what needs to happen after harm is done. Before I left prison, that's what we were talking about: community healing, healing justice, the concept of redemption, and not redemption from his, you know, like he had to redeem himself because of his political convictions, you know, or be ashamed of his political convictions. That's not what his idea of redemption was. His what he was wrestling with redemption about was for himself, was he had a regret that he was forced into a situation where he had to cause other people pain. And this is what society doesn't realize about our political prisoners, right? Because there is this false sense that our political prisoners, they just people that ain't got nothing else better to do than go out there in the streets and they got axe to grind. But no, our political prisoners are regular human beings. You know, they're human beings, they're parents, you know, mothers and fathers, you know, trying to raise their children on sound principle and to be peace-loving people, to create environments that's conducive for everybody to grow and reach full human development. And it just so happens that, you know, there was a system ran by people, you know, that said, no, you can't do that in peace. And they said, no, hell no. And so they fought, you know, and sometimes, you know, they may have made, you know, premature moves or whatever the case may be. They might analyze things different. And like Maroon thought of different ways he would do things if he was to do it all over. And he don't want me to make, and other brothers that he had mentored, to make the same mistake. But I think it's important for people to know that, you know, and although I'm free of the torment from prison, you know, for 4 years, it pained me to know that Maroon was still in there. And I believe that had he gotten out in time, you know, he might not have developed that cancer. You know, seeing Maroon come home, you know, I can't tell you how it made me feel as somebody who came out with a big sense of survivor's guilt, because I felt that I was getting something that I didn't deserve as much as him, that he was the one that should be released, not me, because I wasn't a political prisoner. He was the one that was in prison for defending his community. I wasn't, you know, and a person like that should not be in prison at all, much less die in prison, surrounded by callous drones, like Robert Salim Holbrook would call them, you know, waiting for him to die. And so I felt a great weight lifted, probably not as great as his family felt, but it pained me to see the state that he was in, you know, before he passed. But the saving grace was that he didn't die in a prison cell. He didn't die chained to a prison infirmary bed or hospice bed, surrounded by sentries who was hurrying him up to die. You know, that he made his transition surrounded by his family and his loved ones and his comrades with dignity. You know, and I would only end with this. This is a piece that I wrote as part of a larger, more epic piece called Plummet to the Summit. And plummet, you know, falling down, but summit being up. The concept was falling up, which is how I describe my growth in prison. And I said, you know, I'm falling, weightless with questions, heavy because I lack answers. Impact cushioned by the caring hands of former Black Panthers. Now vanquished freedom fighters who languish in the house of anguish. Old generals buried alive, hidden from justice's blindfolded eyes, taught me first how to survive, to expect the unexpected so that I'd never be surprised. They told me the revolution will not be televised. They told me it's all right to be smart, but it's better to be wise. Even as I maintained the heart of a child, they taught me how to reconcile being civilized with staying unbroken and wild. And they taught me the art of falling with style. They taught me how to recognize, and that they recognize my potential and my desire to be better and to do great things. They stretched forth their feathers and put me under their wings. And they took my mind on flights and my spirit to new heights. And in the wee hours of the nights, I put my soul on ice, flying high as a kite with flocks of flapping books while locked in a box, neighboring so-called crooks and social pariahs behind barbed wire and concrete walls stuck. I learned that when unbroken spirits fall, we fall up, falling. It's okay to feel bitter at times, they said, all right to be fed up, all right to fall down, just as long as you get up. And when pursuing your highest destiny, never let up. So go ahead, man, fall, then stand up and stand tall. Like a black rose in full bloom, stand proud. And I ain't hoping for hot air balloons or damn clouds. With dignity, I fall mine first to infinity. In the tightest confines, the wingspan of my mind stretched fully and flew quite freely. In cramped cell space, my imagination roared and raced like a street bike and popped wheelies. In dim-lit dungeons, I've brightened my vision, sinking in quicksands of confusion, I would discover my mission. And Maroon inspired that. Maroon inspired that. I won't take up too much more time. I'm gonna pass it on to my sister, Teresa. I did want to read some words from Maroon, but all you gotta do is get this book, Maroon the Implacable, and get this comic book, Maroon Comics, and you get all the words you need to get from ancestor Russell Maroon Shoatz. True and living Maroon in the 20th century. True and living Maroon by every definition of the term Maroon. He was a Maroon, not just in name.
Thank you. Thank you, Ghani. I appreciate you. And thank you everyone who has joined in, and I'm honored to be on the panel with everyone that's on the panel now. I'm going to just take 2 minutes because I didn't want to speak. And it was because everyone knows me and my family, and what we tried to do for Maroon and freeing him was from our heart. But Ghani can offer you a whole different position on Maroon. And it's something that I'm trying to get from a lot of the prisoners who were really there with him in solitary confinement, because he had mentored so many before and after solitary confinement. But I think the most powerful education and mentoring that he did was in solitary confinement, because I can remember him calling me saying, the guys are dying back here. At first he was telling me how cold it was. And by the time I got to the bottom of it, it was because there were young guys, more than 10, I believe, had hung themselves in solitary confinement. And they had to revamp the heating system. And that's why it was so cold. Maroon didn't know that all of those kids had killed themselves in solitary. And when I think back to that, that's because those are some of the guys that he just couldn't reach. Or Daddy told me he did something like fishing. Fishing is a way to send letters to other prisoners who were in solitary confinement. He would fish string letters along from door to door, although being behind thick glass, lights on 24 hours a day. So I'm going to bottom line this saying, if I didn't have, Ghani had something totally different, his relationship with daddy. I had that general on my back. And it not that I was being beat down, it was, he gave me the direction to go. When I felt like I didn't know where to go, some or all of you I would lean on, because I didn't think I had what it took to free him. And I can remember crying out to a lot of you and Barbara Ferguson saying, stop the crying, shut up, get out there and fight for your dad. Not shut up in a bad way, but it laced my boots up and got me on a path to free my dad. This release, this compassionate release, Maroon was originally denied in August 2021. Judge Scott had listed everything Maroon was eligible for, the compassion for the medical transfer. It's what they were calling it. He was stage 4 cancer. He didn't have long to live. He qualified, bottom line that. And she took us on an emotional roller coaster. And the judge even said, no prisoner should die alone. I don't want this man to die alone, no prisoner. But when she made her ruling the following week, she denied Maroon. And on that Zoom call, I broke out and I cried. And I did something that I didn't think I would ever do. And I apologized to the officer's family, because the judge had told the family of the officer that was murdered that Maroon was serving a life sentence for that. Maroon didn't pull the trigger. Maroon didn't shoot your loved one, the police officer. And you know that. And so I really, I cried because I'm looking at that family. I've lost my father behind walls, and these people had lost their father as well. But they had the hate in their heart for my dad, who didn't even kill their father. So I cried for them to regain themselves, because they were lost, and they're still lost in that murder of their father. And I don't hold that against them, but the hate that they have for my father, I held against them. So they're sick, they're still wounded, but to hold that against my dad and to stand in that courtroom and try to make sure that he's not released and he's terminal, that was pain like I had never experienced before. So it was bittersweet. Maroon was released because when the judge denied the medical transfer, I just said, God, my ancestors, the creator, please, God, it cannot end like this. And I went back to something I heard a nurse tell me. And I said, you got to build on that. Something wasn't right about that story. And I called the nurse that day and I said, Leah, I want my progress report. And she said, Teresa, I can't get in the computer. I don't have my password. I said, I'll wait. And she fumbled around. I can't find my password. How you don't know your password? And you're the head nurse. And the bottom line is, I did have help. You guys, Dr. Barbazella, Brett Grody, kept texting me. Teresa, if you're on the phone with the nurse, ask her about an IV. And I kept asking her, then Barbazella texted me. And then when the nurse finally broke down and told me TPN, and I said, what is TPN? So I text Brett Grody. Brett Grody, I'm on the phone with the nurse. She said something about TPN. And he was telling me, I'm too busy, Teresa. You can Google it yourself. Well, darn it, I'm on the phone with the nurse. And he called me. He said, get off the phone with the nurse. They were starving Maroon to death. So we got to fight now for those that are still behind bars. And I believe it all goes to the medical. I really believe the fight. I visited Sundiata last year, And he was still in that mode. He didn't want the guards to hear what he was saying. We were in COVID. We were behind glass. And he kept whispering to where we couldn't even hear him. We had to eventually leave earlier. But that's where we are now. Free all our political prisoners. And especially those who are dying behind bars. So I love you all and thank you for allowing me to introduce Ghani in my place.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you so much, Ghani. I know that it's, very hard to lose somebody like Maroon. He's an amazing human being. One more person who did pass this past year, one of the longest held political prisoners, certainly the longest held Black Panther political prisoner, is Romaine Chip Fitzgerald. He was captured, when he was 18 years old, or perhaps 19, and he spent more than 51 years in prison, was denied parole many times. Even after he had had a stroke, he was still denied parole, even though he was wheelchair bound, and he suffered a second stroke and joined the ancestors on March 29th and died while shackled to a prison bed. Just as Teresa was saying, she was happy that it did not happen to her father. So we do have a very moving piece by Chip that he wrote because he was looking forward to his next parole hearing and hoping that he would finally make it out the door. This was in addition to many endeavors to get the governor of California to commute his sentence and so on and so forth, none of which ever happened, but people certainly did try. So he wrote this very moving piece called Upon My Release. Upon my release, I will welcome the warmth and laughter of my grandchildren. I look forward to their hugs and smiles. I will be the grandpa present to soothe them through occasional scrapes after they show me their somersaults and expert bike riding maneuvers. I will have the chance to witness numerous bird species and listen to their songs. I'll hope for a rain to nourish the vegetables and flowers I planted days before, just as my mother used to do, and reach for the rainbow stretching across the sky after the rain. I will feel the mist on my face and rejoice. I will experience the waves of the ocean reflecting the moon-filled sky and the cozy breeze and graceful winds upon my skin. I will be outside in nature's healing environment as it soothes and comforts my body, allowing my age-filled bones to heal and rejuvenate in ways lost for most of my life. At the end of the evening, I will look forward to a soft bed and sinking my head into fluffy pillows as I curl up in soft covers and dream sweet dreams, knowing I will awake to a new day of freedom. I will have my eyes dazzled by the spectrum of radiant colors that only a city can sparkle. I look forward to enjoying the sights from a car window, recognizing the aroma of the city's possessions all converging together. I hope to share love and laughter, the joys and hardships of life with a special woman. We will lift each other's hearts as equals to face a brighter tomorrow. I will continue to appreciate the love and challenges of family. I imagine our dialogue will include our sense of community, our country, the world, our contributions and help to our neighborhoods, and, of course, sharing my personal sorrows and hopes. I will lead by example with spontaneous acts of love, compassion, and kindness, thereby demonstrating my belief in the transformation of others. I will enjoy volunteering in preschools and visiting the elderly in convalescent hospitals. I will always give special devotion to finding peace and moving full speed to overcome the damaging impact associated with the daily screams of terror and absence of dignity that have engulfed my prison environment. Most of all, I will be dedicated to the journey and opportunity of spending my remaining life giving of myself to achieve the many treasures of what it means to be a valued human being embracing freedom. So all I can say after that is, Romaine Chip Fitzgerald, presente. And having said that, I just wanted to say David is having some technical difficulties because he lost his internet and he's working from his phone now. Our host, just so you know that, not a big problem. So next up, we have two more people who passed last year, former MOVE political prisoners, our dear sister Consuela Africa and Chuck Africa. Both transitioned to the ancestors last year. And we have with us MOVE members Ramona, Janet, Janine, and Eddie Africa, all former political prisoners, all amazing human beings, I may say, and they will pay tribute now to both of them. Go ahead, guys.
On the move. This is Ramona, Africa. I'm Minister of Communication for the MOVE organization. I'm also the sole adult survivor of the May 1985 bombing and murder of the MOVE family, including 6 adults, 5 children, and a number of animals that we were very close to and also considered our family. I first came to the MOVE trial in March of 1979. That's when I first saw Chuck Africa. I was immediately impressed by how strong and uncompromising he was, and how he was not intimidated by the judge, the prosecutor, or any other official at that time. The thing was, at that time, Delbert Africa was giving Judge Marachi, the trial judge, some serious information, some serious MOVE law about how MOVE people were not intimidated by him at all. When Delbert finished talking to Judge Marachi, giving him this information, people in the courtroom just start applauding, broke into an applause, including me. Now, at that time, Judge Marachi singled me out of everybody in the courtroom, called me up to the bar of the court, and told me I could purge myself, I could redeem myself by apologizing to the court. At that point, Chuck stood up in defense of me, speaking out in defense of me to Judge Marachi. And Chuck didn't even know me personally at that time, but that's just who Chuck was. Somebody who would stand up in defense of what's right and actively fought against injustice and what he knew was wrong. So, that's how I met Chuck. Also, at that time, like I said, I was really impressed with Chuck. He was strong, uncompromising, and it wasn't too many young people like that. Chuck was young at the time, like 19, something like that. And that's why I was really impressed with him. Chuck was a strong soldier, in the Army of Life, a strong soldier in Jaan Africa's revolution, and Judge Marachi held him in contempt, allegedly for speaking out, so strongly. And Chuck ended up telling him, to stop picking on the spectators in the courtroom. But he was really mad at MOVE people, but knew that he could never intimidate MOVE people with his impotent threat of contempt of court. So, Judge Marachi was so mad at MOVE people and Chuck as well. All I can say is long live Chuck Africa, long live Jaan Africa's powerful MOVE family, long live Jaan Africa's revolution, long live Jaan Africa forever, long live Jaan Africa.
Eddie.
On the move. My name is Edward Africa. I'm one of the MOVE 9. When I first came in contact with MOVE in the early 70s, I ran into Chuck. And he was like maybe 10 or 12 years younger than me. But upon hearing him talk and hearing him speak, I was attracted. You know what I mean? That this brother had fire in him. And so when he spoke, you could feel the fire. And then he explained to me that the fire came from Jaan Africa, and that's who was teaching him, because there would be times when Chuck would read pages of guidelines verbatim without looking at them, just from memory. And so when he spoke, you listened, because you were hearing Jaan Africa's information. You were hearing the law of move. And so we became friends. You know what I mean? Playing ball together, going to demonstrations, just being together, exercising, boxing, in jail. And all through this time, this brother stayed strong. You know what I mean? He stayed fiery. And one of the problems that came out of that is that the system don't like having young people be that aggressive. And so they try to single him out, but he stayed strong. And so I'd say Chuck Africa is my brother. He's our brother. He's our brother then, he's our brother now. And so long live Chuck, long live Jaan Africa, because Jaan Africa is responsible for Chuck. So as I say, on the move, and I hope that people will never forget Chuck. You know what I mean? He did what he had to do, and he was a good example. So on the move, long live Jaan Africa, and long live Chucky.
No, you're not cut off. Go ahead and speak. Talk about Consuela.
All right, on the move, everybody. I'm Janine Africa, one of the Move 9, just released in 2019. And I want to talk about my warrior sister, Consuela, Minister of Confrontation for the Move organization, and lived up to the title. You never had to worry about nothing, because Consuela never hesitated to protect this family whenever we were attacked by police, prison guards, anybody trying to hurt this family. She would jump out there no matter the size, man, woman. She didn't care. She would do whatever was necessary to protect this family. And she was that way to her very last days. And I miss and love Consuela. And I want everybody to not feel bad for her, but celebrate her strength and her commitment and everything about her, and know that Consuela is still strong today, no matter where she's at. On the move, long live Jaan Africa, long live Consuela.
Long live Jaan Africa.
On the move, everybody. This is Janet Africa. I also wanted to pay tribute to our sister Merle Africa, who passed while we were in prison in 1995. Our brother Phil Africa, who passed while we were in prison in 2015. And our brother Delbert Africa, who was released from prison in 2019 and only was out for 6 months and passed away only because this system had medically killed him before he walked out the door. So they knew what was going to happen. They knew what they did. So I want everybody to remember all these MOVE members. Me, Janine, and Eddie spent 41 years in prison for something we didn't do, because we talked about revolution, we talked about Jaan Africa, and we demonstrated it through all those years in prison and out. Mona spent 7 years in prison, but she demonstrated her commitment in May of 1985 when they dropped that bomb and murdered 11 of our family members. We want everybody to remember, even though these people that we speak of, our ancestors, our brothers, our sisters, all comrades, they are warriors and will continue to be warriors and examples for us to follow. We want to free all political prisoners, free Mumia Abu-Jamal, who supported MOVE through all of this from the very beginning, supported us when other people turned their back and didn't understand our cause. Mumia was there, and now we are there for Mumia. So everybody fight hard to release political prisoners. Everybody fight hard to protect the life that we are afforded.
And we want everybody to know, Teresa, Russell, we understand what you went through. because we were there, our family went through it, and we understand how all those political prisoners feel. And what all the work that Jericho and other movements do is important and is appreciated by all of us that were in jail and are still in jail.
Yes.
So what's the call? Free them all.
Free them all. Free them all.
On the move.
On the move, free them all. All right, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. Next up, I have to say something I've been looking forward to and waiting for is our brother cultural warrior Ngoma, who has been educating people for many years, and he was about to give us some beautiful music, and I'm sure if we all want to sing along, we can.
Yeah, on the move.
On the move.
You hear me? I'm good?
On the move.
On the move. On the move.
Yeah, we can hear you good.
So I first heard of Move in the early 70s. I was in Mary Baraka's organization, and some of the people from Move came to Newark and visited him. And that's when I first found out about what was going on there. I've been doing this work maybe like 50 or 60 years or more. And this is a little piece that I wrote, and I hope y'all will dig it. Epigraph. There are over 69 political prisoners and POWs captured in these yet to be United States. This poem is dedicated to them with my apologies that there are too many to mention. Real Black Panthers ain't in Wakanda. Real Black Panthers never had vibranium, ain't in Wakanda, ain't Afrofuturistic. In fact, their future is in peril, an endangered species, living heroes and sheroes, not Marvel characters imagined by Disney. No blockbuster movie by Hollywood. America says they don't exist, but J. Edgar Hoover declared them dangerous, counterintelligence programmed them, disappeared them behind prison walls. Warriors in the struggle for liberation never asked to be citizens, righteous soldiers. They did not wear uniforms. Guilty only of taking a stand to free the land, framed by a system that refuses to acknowledge their sovereignty. Go and tell the children, tell them we are real heroes that lived and died for freedom. Call them by their name: Fred Hampton, Little Bobby Hutton, Safiya Bukhari, Herman Ferguson, Bashir Hamid, Zayd Malik Shakur, John Geronimo, as in G. Jagger Pratt. Just a few who died too soon, like Kuwasi Balagoon. There's no need to make shit up. Many still languish behind the wall, heroes and sheroes standing tall. Mumia Abu-Jamal, Russell Maroon Shoatz, Herman Wallace, Mutulu Shakur, Jalil Muntakim, Robert Seth Hayes, Imam Jamil Al-Amin, Rochelle Sinkay McGee, some locked down almost half a century. Yes, my friends, there are real Black Panthers. This is only a few that need to be freed, and they damn sure ain't in Wakanda. What's the call? Free them all. What's the call? Free them all.
Free them all.
Hey,
Right now, on the move.
On the move.
On the move. Fantastic.
Come on.
Thank you so much, Ngoma. We'll expect to hear some more from you later on. Can't have an event without you. You've always been so wonderful to us. Okay, so now that we have this beautiful music, we will talk about our recent released political prisoners, which is always a wonderful thing. This is the celebratory part. Our brother Jan Laaman of the United Freedom Front was released on parole last year after spending 37, count them, 37 years in prison. And we are happy to welcome him home after all this time. And we are proud to introduce Jan's co-defendant, another former political prisoner still out here doing the work to free them all, our brother Kazi Touré, to share some reflections with us about Jan. Gotta unmute, Kazi.
Okay, I got it. Peace, peace. Peace, comrades, sisters, brothers, friends. And as Malcolm said to us, pointed out very clearly, enemies monitoring everything we do. As you know, they're monitoring us. But thank you, Ann and Jericho, for, asking me to say a few words. It's an honor to honor those recently released after decades-long struggle. Last year, we had some positive, significant developments for political prisoners from the tribunal convicting this government of crimes against humanity. It was no easy, nothing to really sneeze at, We did it, and that's good to the release of Russell, Maroon Shoatz, David Gilbert, and my Cody Jaan. Jaan, like most of us, upon release, kept stepping, getting out. He involved himself doing Zooms, radio shows, and other work, mostly about his stay in prison. But most former political prisoners released, as everybody on this show knows, have a lot of conditions, parole conditions that restrict them from movement. Recently, Jaan has received increased government attention. They, talking about he's been monitored, he's been on the internet a lot. Thus, making it, really necessary for him to take a few steps back from public activity. Well, for the moment anyways. It's pretty easy for them to take down one person, but most of the time, that's not the government's goal. Government's goal is often to, target organizations and try to hurt and damage the organization and take that down. That's why, that's COINTELPRO. And that's what it's always been about. The one organization that this United States of America has always worried about since the time of J. Edgar Hoover and his COINTELPRO stuff has been, the Black Panther Party. And those people close to the party and the allies of the party, they get targeted. Dynamic and important work of Jericho that Jericho does, including putting out a solid revolutionary overstanding of this racist, sexist, homophobic, imperialist state, makes Jericho and all its people targets. And, from this form of COINTELPRO, we should be aware of it, and we have to in the future. Our comrade's Maroon was released just weeks before he passed. Same as Marilyn, Dilbert, Chucky, not much better, which means, we're all gonna have to double down, and do more than petitioning the Lord with prayer, and as we continue to struggle, to free up more political prisoners in 2020, 2022, we have to keep our defenses up against this types of attacks, you know, and please don't allow yourself to be played, you know, unwittingly. Like Pam said, you know, to me a little while ago, she said, Kazi, if it's not about building unity, you know, leave it alone. You know, free the land, on the move, free them all.
Free them all. Thank you so much, Kazi. Thank you. And that is so important, what you just said. And we do have to pay strict attention. You know, we know it, that, you know, I just consider everything I say and do to be public. That's my way around that. Okay, so we also had released this year, as Kazi just mentioned, Brother David Gilbert, who was amazingly made parole at his first board after spending 40 plus years in prison. And the only reason he was even able to do that was after a lot of pressure and a lot of work from a lot of people, including his support committee, which has been consistent with him over many years, bothering Governor Cuomo. On Governor Cuomo's last day in office, he got a grant of commutation of sentence. David did, reducing his minimum term from 75 years to 40. So since he had already served 40 years, he was able to go to the parole board, which he did in October in 2021. And he was granted parole on October 26th, an important day apparently. And he was released on November 4th. And among many other things that David did and has done and continues to do, in addition to being an incredible writer and having several excellent books, including one of my favorites, Love and Struggle, definitely should be read. Great self-crit in there, some of the best I've ever read. He also did great work inside the walls during the AIDS epidemic. When he was at Auburn Correctional Facility in early years of his sentence, in 1987, he co-founded an inmate peer education program on HIV and AIDS, and a similar, more successful project in Great Meadows in Comstock following his transfer to the eastern part of the state. And these programs were later adopted on a national level. So, you know, they were very effective and very good. So among many other things that David did in being a mentor and an educator. And we do have a very short video message from David, which I hope we will be able to play.
Wonderful to be able to join this Jericho meeting from outside the walls. It's a tremendous victory for our movement. It took incredible hard work and dedication. And even though I'm a personal beneficiary of this great change, it was a product of tremendous amount of work and struggle and movement against mass incarceration and to free political prisoners. We think and we commemorate all the beautiful comrades who died, who passed away in prison. At the same time, we appreciate all they gave to the struggle. And as we celebrate victories, that's a way to rededicate and re-energize ourselves to fight the battles for future victories, to free all the political prisoners and to end mass incarceration. Thank you for all the great work you do.
Yes, David also an amazingly humble human being in addition to everything else we might want to say about David. And so we're going to start talking about picking up the work in 2022, which is what we plan to be doing, continuing what was laid out for us by our sister Safiya Bukhari. So we have been working a long time with a whole coalition of folk, the same coalition of folk who were working on freeing Maroon, are now working on gaining the release of political prisoner Kamau Siddiqui, who was framed up on false charges and has a lot of medical conditions, hepatitis C, cirrhosis of the liver, sarcoidosis, among other things. And since he refused to help them capture Assata Shakur, they told him he would die in prison. We wanted to have Ksisay speak for us tonight, but she unfortunately is not well. So Brother Shep stepped in at the last minute. I have to really thank him for that. And he is going to give an update on what we are doing around our brother Kamau Siddiqui, trying to get him free. Thank you, Brother Shep.
More power to the people.
All power.
Okay, I was actually told I was coming on after a film, but I'm gonna do what I can right now. Filling for Ksisay. Okay, yeah, I heard some noise in the background. If everyone looks in the chat, I'm gonna put this thing. 1 second. Okay, you'll see a link tree for the campaign to free Kamau Siddiqui. Folks should write that down or copy it and go directly to that link. That will tell you what we're doing with his campaign and how to get involved in this campaign. And after I finish my quick presentation, hopefully everyone will click on and join us in freeing Kamau Siddiqui. I'm gonna do this basically in a historical chronological order. Starting out by saying that in 1968, the Black Panther Party came to New York. And shortly after that, Kamau Siddiqui joined the Jamaica branch of the New York State chapter of the Black Panther Party. He did that at the age of 17. A lot of people know that have done any study, the average age of a Panther was 17 years old. And I tell a lot of young people that just in terms of what we were able to accomplish. And even some folks were 15 and 16. Everybody here knows Mumia was like 15 and so forth. But he joined, did all the work in the party, sold the newspapers, breakfast programs, did all the work that Panthers do, including the study. Moving ahead to 1971, there was a split in the Black Panther Party, primarily caused by the counterintelligence program that Brother Kazi mentioned, J. Edgar Hoover and all of them declaring us the greatest internal threat to the security of the United States, which really unleashed all the fascist police forces upon us. Even up to 1969, about 28 Panthers were murdered and killed by these pigs. And we suffered more casualties even after that. But in 71, due to the fact that most of our officers were bombed and destroyed and attacked, members locked up, folks were forced to go underground. Kamau Siddiqui was one of those Panthers that went underground. He was captured shortly after that time, and he spent 5 years as a prisoner of war from the Black Liberation Army. He was released in 1979, and for folks who remember the 80s, I call it the decadent 80s because really nothing was going on. Disco was around, jazz was gone, R&B was gone, and the drugs were really hitting the scene during the 80s and part of the 90s. So there was really nothing going on, but Kamau was dealing with family, taking care of family life. He has 2 daughters, Ksisay, who is the daughter of another Panther, Pan Hannah, who is right now, that's why Ksisay is not here. Her mom is really sick. And Kakuya, who's the daughter of Asada Shakur. So he took care of family. He worked with a telephone company, was close to retiring, dealt with community work, which is what we always do. And then he was set up alleged for some alleged child abuse from a woman that he was seeing at that time. He was arrested. During that arrest, even though they knew that those charges wouldn't stick, they held him there to continue trying to set up and frame Panthers. This was around 2002. Just before that, in 2001, people remember there was the 9/11 attacks. The United States passed their Patriot Act, and they went on this whole frenzy of trying to get terrorists. Everything was terrorists, terrorists, terrorists. A lot of people were framed and set up, but the fascist police forces wanted to try to clean up their cold cases. And so they went to 1971, all the way back there, to say that Kamau had killed a police officer in Georgia. People might remember the San Francisco 8. They did the same thing 5 years later with them. Went back to 1971 and said they killed a police officer in San Francisco. So they were trying to clean up all these cold cases by framing and setting up mostly Panthers and RNA soldiers. In 2003, he was convicted, primarily because, as Ann had mentioned earlier, the FBI and all those forces, they had tried to convince Kamau that if he helped get Asada to go to another country so she could be captured and brought back to the United States, that he could go free. Of course, Kamau refused to do that. And so he was convicted and he's been in prison ever since then. Kamau, for most people that know him, he's not vocal. He doesn't do a lot of writing. He doesn't, you don't hear or see anything. And like a lot of other Panthers who are unknown, I believe there's like 11 of us still in prison that we know of, like Veronza Bowers and Ed Poindexter, different names you don't hear. And so Kamau's basically not really known. And we try to say, a lot of people talk about Asada. If you speak about Asada, you need to talk about Kamau Siddiqui. You need to talk about Sundiata Acoli, who was captured with Asada. You need to remember Zaid Shakur, who was killed on that same turnpike with us when Asada was captured. So when we talk about Asada, we need to talk about those who were part of that circle that we're talking about with her. What we have decided to do at this point, Kamau is under severe medical difficulties. I believe Teresa mentioned that, about the medical stuff that Maroon had to go under. And that medical neglect is being set up to kill our prisoners while they're captive. We've lost a lot of prisoners inside. We heard about Merle, Africa. A lot of people might know about Albanoa, Washington, about Bashir Hamed, about Abdul Majid, about Kwazi Malagoon. So many of our freedom fighters that died in those prisons due to medical neglect and just outright assassination by those so-called doctors, the real quacks of the medical industry. That's who's in these prisons. On that note, Kamau has hepatitis C. He suffered for it for decades. He also contracted that COVID virus, survived that. He had a wound on his leg and they allowed it to get infected and to grow and to fester to the point where they said they had to amputate his leg. He refused to do that. People responded. When we shut down the phones in the hospital, this so-called prison hospital, which anybody that looks up the Atlanta Augusta prison hospital that he's in right now, many prisoners have died in that hell house. That's basically what it is. Right now, Kamau is medicating himself. They don't have enough doctors to take care of people in that prison hospital, allegedly because of COVID, so they're understaffed. And he's actually treating himself right now. That's what he has to do in that hospital. Excuse me, that prison hellhole, death house. So looking at that, those medical conditions, as Teresa mentioned, a lot of our prisoners are elders. Kamau will be 69 on February 19th. He's an elder. He needs to be home. He needs to get proper medical care. And we just completed getting Maroon home under those conditions. And all of us decided we were going to find somebody else. And Kamau is the person we're dealing with right now. So again, go to that link tree, get involved. Our next general meeting is on this coming Monday. Hook up with it. It starts at 7 o'clock on Mondays. That's when we meet. We have committees set up, 5 different ones. If you are a minister or a pastor or a preacher, or you deal with spirituality and religion, we have an interfaith committee that you can be a part of. So we can get folks out on that level. We have outreach, we have culture for those who perform and do different, the spoken words, music, whatever. You can join that committee. Of course, outreach, you put the information out, direct action. Just join us. Go to that link tree, see where you fit in. Everyone could do something. So we can bring Kamau home this year as soon as possible. So go to the link on February 19th, his 69th birthday. There will be a webinar. Look for it. Come and join us on that webinar. We're going to celebrate his 69th birthday. And hopefully that'll be the last one that he'll have to spend behind those bars in that dungeon. On behalf of the campaign and the family of Kamau and all of our political prisoners, I want to say free them all power to the people, and pick up the work, as Sister Safiya would say. Right on.
Right on. Thank you so much, Brother Shep. That was very excellent. And yes, people, please do join us. This is a nice big coalition of folk, and we are doing serious work, and we can use all the help we can get. So we do have, I forgot to mention, and I will go back to him, another person who was released this year, who is still currently under parole, federal parole, was briefly with us as one of our political prisoners, is Oglala Lakota tribal member Michael Marcus, also known as Rattler. People know him as Rattler. He was charged alongside 5 indigenous water protectors who aided others in the resistance camps engaging in nonviolent direct action to stop the desecration and construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline near the Standing Rock Reservation. He was released in 2021, but he's still serving 3 years of parole. Rattler served as what they call an akisita, a continuation of a traditional role among the Lakota who protect the peace and hold their own people accountable of their responsibilities for the collective. He gave necessary knowledge of militarized police tactics, scouting of DAPL, aided de-escalation during nonviolent direct actions, and helped those within camp to be safe and sober. So Rattler and a few other folk, Dion, Angry Bird, and Red Fawn, received awards on November 5th, 2021 from the North Dakota Human Rights Coalition for their work in the No DAPL camps, sacrifices endured from federal targeting, and their continued commitment to land and water protection. Rattler was able to speak a few words, and we hope that we will be able to show the short video of Rattler speaking.
Chairs that are taken up in here, it's pretty true. A lot of people don't think if it's not happening to them, it doesn't matter. Or they put the money ahead of everything else. When we went up there, we put our lives out there for not for us or for you, but for our children, our grandchildren, and their grandchildren. You know, and a lot of us are going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep doing it. Because it's the right thing to do. If I go to prison again, that's what it's got to do. But just know, if you do the same thing, you got people here that support you, people at Line 3, Bayou Bridge, people that were at Standing Rock, all over the world that would stand next to you. And that's what helped me get through it. I was getting letters every day, people thanking me for standing up. They keep calling me a hero every time Sandra does. I say, I'm not a hero. I'm just a flea. We're all just fleas. So we all make that dog itch. And that's what we got to do. And I hope you all can get the word out to others and wake them up. That just because it's not happening here doesn't mean it doesn't affect them. Line 3 is just upriver from Duluth. Or just right up there, around there. Actually, right there. Right in the same area, you know. St. Paul, people from St. Paul, they get the same thing, but they don't. It doesn't. They say it doesn't affect them because it's not there, and it affects them. When we stood at Standing Rock, we stood for 14 million people that were downriver, and that river goes all the way to Gulf of Mexico. But you know, I'm just glad that what I'm doing made a difference to some people. And I'm hoping that way I can keep doing it. You know, right now I'm on federal probation, so I can't do it. So I help out again. But I always keep my head high, and hope you all do the same too. All right? Meeting with Tony.
Meeting with Tony.
I love that brother. You know, he just walked out of prison, and he's like, well, if I have to, I'll go right back in, you know. Pretty amazing stuff. And I know that audio was a little hard to hear, but he was talking about how this was being done for everybody, you know, for the children and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren and, you know, everybody yet to come. So I did want to give some brief updates of other things we're also doing in 2022. Aside from Kamau, who is very important, we have, of course, Mumia Abu-Jamal. Got a short statement from Mumia folk. They said Mumia Abu-Jamal's health has improved since the movement won hepatitis C, heart surgery, and cataract treatment for him. And everybody knows how hard we all had to fight for Mumia. He was on death row. We beat that back twice. Then they sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Now we're trying to get him once again in front of the courts. He still has serious liver issues due to years of inadequate and malignant mistreatment by the prison system and high vulnerability to COVID and other infectious diseases. His legal case has transitioned from focusing on recusal issues in his previous appeals to new exculpatory evidence in his case discovered and released by the new Philly DA, Larry Krasma, over 2 years ago. That's the current appeal that just went in on February 4th. The issue of what is in those 6 out of 33 boxes. We don't know what happened to the other 27, but we have 6. We will continue to demand both his compassionate release due to his medical conditions and long wrongful incarceration, and factual release by pursuing appeals of his wrongful conviction due to police, prosecutorial, and judicial misconduct in his case. The Mumia movement has recently developed a new campaign known as Love Not Fear, led by young Philadelphia activists and grounded in tying his case to the border liberation movement at the heart of his frame-up. So we know that that is something that we'll all be working on. We know that Mumia needs to be free just like everybody else does. Then we also have many people that we're working on. A Native American prisoner of war, Leonard Peltier, who is an innocent man who has been in prison since his illegal capture on February 6, 1976 in Canada, is currently petitioning, and this is not the first or even the second or third time he's done this, petitioning President Biden for clemency, because all of his legal appeals have been exhausted. And he has also got serious health problems, and he has this thing that's called an abdominal aortic aneurysm, which could rupture at any time and lead to his death. So in addition to people trying to get him out on compassionate release, trying to get him out on any other way, going back through all the transcripts of the trial to find any way to get him back in court, they have a petition to President Biden. Dr. Mutulu Shakur, also in prison since 1986, is petitioning Biden for clemency. He was rejected for no reason, as usual with our prisoners, for parole in 2016 and 2018. This is despite having an exemplary record and no infractions. He was also turned down for compassionate release twice, I believe, despite suffering from stage 3 bone marrow cancer. His legal team is currently pursuing all possible avenues leading to his release. And for people who may not know this, Mutulu in 1970 began working with the Lincoln Detox program right here in the Boogie Down Bronx, and this offered drug rehabilitation to heroin addiction using acupuncture, and it was very, very successful. He became the program's assistant director and remained associated with the program until 1978. He was certified and licensed to practice acupuncture in the state of California in 1979, and he went on to help found and direct the Black Acupuncture Advisory Association of North American, BANA, and the Harlem Institute of Acupuncture. So amazingly, he's now being told, like Physician Hill thyself, the man has stage 3 bone marrow cancer. He is in constant pain, and there is this petition to Biden there, and people can go to another link tree, which is Linktree Political Prisoners. One of our comrades, Verbena, she went and put that together, and all of these people I'm talking about are on that link tree. You can sign the petition for Leonard. You can sign the petition for Mutulu. You can sign the petition for Sundiata. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's really amazing. Now, Sundiata, as we know, and as Shep said, Asada's co-defendant in prison since 1973. All right, Sundiata is 85 years old. Sundiata has been eligible for parole since 1993 and has been denied 6 times already, even though he has not had a single disciplinary infraction in over 25 years. So in addition to a petition to Governor Murphy for commutation of sentence, which we can all sign if we haven't done so already, the Bring Sundiata Home Alliance and his legal team are appealing his last parole denial, which should be before the Supreme Court of New Jersey very soon, maybe even next month. So, in addition to everything else that Sundiata does, he's an educator, he's a mathematician, he used to work with NASA, he's a poet, he's a visual artist, and he is a mentor to many prisoners and a grandfather, and I believe a great-grandfather. And he currently suffers from the beginning signs of dementia, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, emphysema, post-COVID-19 symptoms, and glaucoma. So if you go to jerichony.org, we have a whole bunch of links there, and you can also go to Sundiata Acoli FC and read all about this. But there are 7, count them, 7 amicus briefs in favor of Sundiata for this upcoming hearing at the New Jersey Supreme Court, 4 of them by black law enforcement organizations. And what everybody says in these briefs is what the law says. In the state of New Jersey, you are supposed to be presumed to be granted parole if you do not seem to be about to commit another crime. And nobody could ever convince me that Sundiata Acoli, at the age of 85, wants to do anything more than spend the rest of his life with his family, which he should certainly be allowed to do. This internal revenge and punishment of both Sundiata and Kamau, because they can't have a SADA, it's got to stop. And we, the people, are going to have to make it stop. Then we also have our brothers, who I think Jihad actually spent time with, the Virgin Island 3, Abdul, Hanif, and Malik, who were arrested, tortured, and continued to be incarcerated almost 50 years after the tragic incident known as the Fountain Valley Massacre in 1972 in the Virgin Islands. They're all elders now. They're being held in a private prison system in Florida. Paulette used to visit them quite often when she was down in Florida. And they have a variety of illnesses as well. And Jericho right now is working very closely with their legal team to see if they can have a parole hearing, which also requires that we have to coordinate with the Virgin Islands legal system. So, you know, it's complicated and also requires something that all of these things require: funds. So on that link tree, you can also make donations, so please do so. And we have to thank our comrades in Philly, Anarchist Black Cross Federation, who set up the new website for the Virgin Island 3, vi3.org. And then we also have our brother Maumin Khabir, formerly known as Melvin Mays. He was captured in 1986 and given a life sentence. Okay? Now, Maumin has COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, severe emphysema, and he's an asthmatic. He also experiences chronic back pain due to bone degeneration. In 2013, he applied for and had a physician at Springfield sign a recommendation for compassionate release, but this was denied by the warden. As of 2015, he has less than 5% lung capacity and relies on oxygen constantly. He always has to have the oxygen tank with him. We are currently waiting on a judge's decision to see if Maumin will be granted a medical transfer to hospice care. Now, this is interesting, too, because apparently he made the parole board back in March of last year, and nobody told even his attorney until Thanksgiving weekend. So, like, they sat on this for more than 6 months, or almost 6 months. You know, it's like outrageous. Anyway, if he is granted this medical transfer to hospice care or parole, however you want to call it, and then transfer to hospice care, because he can't just walk out the door, he's in no condition to do so, he'll go to Chicago and be in hospice with his sister. And we as Jericho are responsible for making sure that he gets there, which requires medical transportation, obviously. So that is another thing that we are working on, and among other people that I may not have mentioned because there are so many. But I say once again, go to the link tree, political prisoners. You can sign all those petitions there. And without further ado, I will now have our dear brother, National Jericho Chair Jihad Abdulmumit, former political prisoner himself, Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army. He's going to speak more on our work in 2022 as we pick up the work and beyond, because it will be beyond, and our work together with the Spirit of Mandela campaign and coalition following the October 21 tribunal, which found the U.S. guilty, once again, of the crime of genocide. And after that, Ngoma will close us out with another song. So, Brother Jihad, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, my comrade, Sister Ann. And assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Jihad Abdulmumit here in Richmond, Virginia. I would like to really thank New York Jericho and all the comrades there for this program and bringing us into this space. I guess in a way, as comrade Sister Safiya said in the beginning, we are all Jericho doing this work. So you look like our comrades and Move and what everybody's doing with Teresa and all the committees and the phenomenal work that Comrade Shep is doing with organizing the political prisoner classes. And we're all Jericho in that sense. And so you say I'm the chairperson, but really, you know, I kind of wonder about that when, you know, everybody on Ann, Kazi, and Shep always telling me what to do. No, we got some other chairpersons. You all just don't know who they are. But anyway, I laugh about that, but I humble myself, you know, to be a servant of the people. So I just want to give a very good update real quick, Comrade Ann, about Maumin. Maumin was granted the parole date the 15th of next month. I recently found out, and this is gonna blow you away. The Bureau of Prisons, yeah, the Bureau of Prisons will finance his travel with the air tanks to Chicago. And I think, yes, they will. And
Are they going to do that all the way to his home, or are they just going to do that to the airport?
No, not to his home, but in talking with his family and the sister, what he'd be saying, they're organizing that. And I guess our conduit is Paulette to let us know. But, you know, we will, as Ann said, you know, be helping financially in any way we can. And so this is very good news. And so I appreciate all the updates. There's so much detailed information about work to do. I just wanted to give just a brief commentary moving forward to 2022 with some of the work that we have in front of us to do. But I will say one of the, you know, the work that we all do, I just repeating myself, is phenomenal. You know, and working, you know, a lot of these prisoners, a lot of our freedom fighters, their names will not even be heard of anymore after 30, 40, 50 years in prison. You know, who would know Maumin Khabir and who he even was? And things of that, who would know Kojo Bomani? So we do a lot we do everything pretty much that we are charged to do since 1998 to make the legacy of our freedom fighters known and to grow and develop our continued struggle to free more of our captive soldiers, sisters and brothers in prison. All right. One of the work that, aside from helping people that are in our sisters and brothers in prison, and giving detailed help too, I'm talking about visiting, paying for lawyers, raising funds and raising money, writing letters, sponsoring letter campaigns, educating communities across the United States of America, participating in rallies. There are other organizations on the front lines that we join in to support. And this coalition and this respect that we have is seen through the WORK, seen through the work. It's not seen through the rhetoric. It's seen through the work, and that's what it's about. And sometimes I refer myself now to the revolutionary administrator, because it's about the work, writing them letters. And you know what? One time a brother told me as an analogy that at this level and stage of the struggle, you know, a lot of times we against high technology and machine guns, all the weaponry that the enemy has against us, here we are pulling an arrow out of our sheath. You know, this is how strategic that we have to be a lot of times and be able to pull that back. And even though it may be some wind resistance, let it go to hit the exact target. You know, and that's the type of strategy in 2021, 2022 that we have to develop. You know, it's important to keep on with you know, like that. That's all, because that awakes and stimulates the masses of people. But we ourselves that really been on the front lines for a long time, we're counting the arrows in our sheath. We're counting the arrows in our sheath, and we're pulling them out, and we're aiming them very strategically. All right. And one of the manifestations of that was with the Spirit of Mandela Coalition that Jalil Muta King called for before he was released from prison. And since that time, we did a lot of things trying to hold the United States accountable to the Mandela rules and standards of care for POWs in all prisons for that matter. All right, but later on, we developed the strategy of having a People's Senate, which we pretty much on this call all know about. the tribunal. And we had that led by Sister Nkichi Taifa and the Howard University School of Law. And we brought that 90-page indictment. We charged the United States guilty of genocide, and an independent panel of jurists, 9 jurists, found them guilty. Now, what's the outcome of that? Different from 70 years ago with William Patterson, Paul Robeson, and Dr. W.B. Du Bois, but they did admirable, powerful work because we was able to build on that and all the tribunals in between. But this time, you know, we were able to organize leading up to it. It wasn't a handful, hear me out closely now. It wasn't a handful of powerful sisters and brothers in a room that put forth together these tribunals, took the results to the United Nations, and then nothing happened. Nothing. United Nations, what? They didn't respond. They're impotent. They don't even, especially when it comes to the United States. We will continue that trajectory because one day, because having that international connection is very important. So we're not going to abandon that. All right. But we realize that this tribunal has to resonate within the psychic and the minds of the people to prove what we already know to be proven, to prove it in a legal way. So that even though your family members who's not at the table with you involved in the movement, the person next door that's always cutting their grass and have 3 cars and so invested in the capitalist system, we did this tribunal so that people, apolitical masses of people can look at this legally. America is a place of law and order. Look at this legally, how this has been violated and how we've been violated for 400 years. Jericho has been very instrumental in every last committee. And this is the work we've done in working with so many wonderful sisters and brothers and making this happen. And now, futuristically speaking, sisters and brothers, we are going to create a space. I want you to hear me very closely because this is a very important initiative. And everybody on this call can be a part of it in their own way and make it just really pop and explode. We're creating a People's Senate. And basically what that is, we are creating a progressive network. We are creating a space, if you can picture a sphere, that we're going to invite other organizations that's already doing the work, academics and clergy and all people in every walk of life that's doing the grassroots work, that stand against the system as it is, that can resonate with the reality of genocide. We're inviting them into the space so that we can have a network to amplify their voice from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the North to the South to the North. And then we have this unified voice through our own Senate, through our own representation. And one reason to connect, since we're talking about political prisoners, I don't have that much more to say because of the admirable reports that came before me. But when we say we demand the release of political prisoners in a country that has 330 million people, you know, that what we say, it better have some teeth. So when we have people sign petitions, as Ann and everybody's presented before, and Shep, and you know, we have petitions online. When we want to organize and call for a rally, when we want to kick your behind out of office, when we want to have somebody elected locally, then we will have a network. We have done our work to network with organizations that are focused on doing, actually fixing the potholes and feeding the people, serving their needs. We brought them together. And now because they're part of a acknowledged part, intentional part of a Senate, when we say we're going to have to do this, sisters and brothers, we have to do this, sisters and brothers, we have to do this, sisters and brothers, it will resonate all the way from California to Texas, all the way up to Maine. Because when you're a member of this Senate, when we say, as you know, Malcolm X and the Spike Lee movie used to go like this, that time when we used to walk down the street with them, if you've seen that movie, and everybody turn like that, that's a visual of what we're trying to do. You know what, sister brother, this is not rhetoric. Because already we have dozens of organizations on board with this. We're already beginning to receive money for this, to sign on to this. And there's a lot of work to be done. So you and your own organization, as to get to a certain point, become part of the Senate. And at some point in time, we will elect representatives for that state or that region, how we're going to do it, and set up a structure of qualifications and so forth and so that. But I hope I've given you a good visual. But so tying it into political prisoners, when we say release a political prisoner, then we know that we have representation that's stronger than what has ever been across the state of New Jersey. That's stronger than it's ever been across the United States of America, because people agreed to be a part of this initiative that's very progressive. So there you go. And Jericho is a fundamental building block in this whole initiative. This is the work that we've been doing since 1998. We are inviting you into that space. We have more freedom fighters to get out, of course. I wanted to make a comment about Kamau. You know, I also did time with Kamau Sadiki. He's the one that gave me my Shahada in prison. And so I have a good quality time spent with these comrades and working out with them and reading and studying with them in prison. And now, you know, it is our mission to get them out, you know, and that's our struggle. More than reading any book, more than anything that a person can do, a young person can do, that we can do ourselves, is being connected to a freedom fighter who is alive and breathing the air to freedom from the clutches of our oppressor. So this is our call. We will continue to do the work. We have chapters all across the United States. I salute each and every one of you. I see Sister Ramona. I'm seeing Ramona. Oh my gosh, I get hooked to death out of you, sister. Golly. But to each and every one of you, you know, I'm your servant. You know, I'm here. I'm going to continue to take my orders from Ann Lamb and Kazi and Shep and everybody else. But I'm here to try to do my part in making it work just here with you. And we have, you know, so much work to do. So, and I'm going to close with that, but that's the good news resonating about Maumin. He is coming home. You know, this is the situation. He had 3 life sentences. What the holdup was, 1 under the old law, 2 life sentences under the new law. The judge said, you know, I can grant this petition under the new law, but since you got an old law, I have nothing to do with that. You got to go to the parole board. But since after that, he did go to the parole board and he got parole on the old law sentence. Now that they revisited, and so the judge that said that about the, if you can follow that, the judge who said that, okay, I will give you that release on the 2 life sentences under the new law. Now that the parole abolished the old law, that's how he was able to get out. Just through that chronological series of events. So I'm going to give time for my comrade brother Ngomo to bring us in like that. And many times in Nzinga, I've seen you and everybody's faces on listening to us on Betty and Brother Ralph on their programs. Now I'm seeing your wonderful, strong faces on this Zoom. So I salute to everyone. And now end as I began with Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam, my brother. Thank you so much. All right, Ngoma, take us home.
Yeah, so I got to say that I'm honored to be a part of this program, humbled to be a part of this movement, and I would like to thank all of y'all for just having me on the program. And any other
we need you.
Any other time that I can do anything for y'all, you know I'm down.
Yeah, we know. Thank you.
This is music for my soldiers, from the red, the black, and green. My comrades in arms with liberation dreams. My people united to take a stand. My people fighting to free the land. This is music for my soldiers standing tall. Political prisoners and POWs behind the wall. This is music for Asata, for Maroon and Mumia, for Jamil Abdullah Alamin and Jalil Mutakim, for Leonard Peltier, for Sinkay McGee, Mutulu Shakur, Oscar Lopez Rivera, and Robert Seth Hayes. This is music for my soldiers, music for my soldiers. This is for those fighting a system is rotten. I sing these names so you won't be forgotten. This is for the list that's too long to call. Music to make the walls of Jericho fall. This is music for my soldiers, yeah. Music for my soldiers. Music for my soldiers. Music for my soldiers. For Jaan, Africa, and the Move family. This is a song calling ancestors who fought the good fight from the break of day to the dark of night. Black Panthers, BLA, Deacons of Defense, RNA, Herman Ferguson, Sonny Abu Badika Carson, Malcolm X. This is for Elombe Breath and Carlos Cook, fighting for liberation by hook or crook. For Robert Williams, for Harriet Tubman, for Fred Hampton and little Bobby Hutton. This is music for my soldiers, yeah. Music for my soldiers. Music for my soldiers. Music for my soldiers. This is music for my soldiers, for the red, the black, and green. My comrades in arms with liberation dreams. My people united to take a stand. My people fighting to free the land. This is for the soldiers. All power to the people. From that turn to Khalid Muhammad and Sekou Odinga and Dekwi. For Mary Baraka, from Mutulu Shakur, G2A Usi and Safiya Bukhari. For my people in exile, Pete O'Neill and Mama C. For the Jericho movement, free all political prisoners, free the land. This is music for my soldiers. Music for my soldiers. Music for my soldiers, yeah. Music for my soldiers.
Woo! Thank you so much. That's fantastic.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got this new book that I just put out. It's called I Didn't Come Here to Tap Dance. You can get it on Amazon or you can get it on Lulu, or you can write me and I'll tell you how you can get a copy of it. It's only been out about a month. I didn't come here to tap dance.
That sounds fantastic.
You got it.
Teresa wanted to know where she could find your music.
On CD Baby, on iTunes, on YouTube. Yeah.
All right, good enough, thanks.
All right, I want to thank everybody, since we're all in gallery view, so everybody can see all of us. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here, for your contributions, for your continued excellent work. We will continue on to free all political prisoners and to free the land. Unfortunately, with the current situation, I will be expecting to be seeing more political prisoners in the coming times, so we will constantly be busy doing this work. But it was great to hear that news about Maumin. I am so happy to hear that That is fantastic. And thank you so much, Brother Jihad. Thank you, Kazi. Thank you, Janet, Janine, Ramona, Eddie. Thank you, Ngoma. Thank you, Brother Kempis, Ghani. You were great. Teresa, thank you so much for being on. It's so important. Brother Shep, always doing tremendous work. We thank you as well. And Sister Nzinga for that fantastic, fantastic poem. So let's remember to pick up the work and make sure you get the information for the February 19th event for Kamau. That will be a virtual event, right, Shep?
Yes, Sam.
All right, so that will be out there, and we'll be putting it out there, and that will be very important. Check out those links that we put in the chat. They were also streaming on the YouTube, so people can do that. I am going to end this meeting, but I think first we have to do our usual thing. What's the call?
Free them all.
What's the call?
Free them all.
Right, free the land.
Free them all.
Land, free 'em all.
Right.
Land, free
All
man.
power to the people.
All power to
All
the
power to the
people.
people.
On the
Right
move.
on.
Move.
I move.
On the move.
On the move.
Yeah. And we'll pick up the work and keep picking it up until all our prisoners are home. That is our mission.
Right.
By any means necessary.
That's right.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Ngoma. March 12th. That's when the film should be out then.
Okay. Great.
I'll keep you posted. It's gonna be at
All
the
right,
Malcolm
please
X
do.
Shabazz Center.
Okay.